All right, everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Headlines, where me and my co-host Steve, we're going to go through headlines of the week. Last week was a little bit short, not a lot going on, a little more economic news, a little bit more stuff to get excited for this week. It's a running joke, but I'm going to keep it going for a while here. I'm bringing up URA right now before I ask Steve how it's going, and it hasn't moved much in the last 2 weeks. So Steve's probably even keel right now.
Free. Um, you're talking about the uranium trades.
Yeah.
I've been trading around the big three that we've been talking about. I'm back in. I'm back in all of them. And OKLO. This is just the anatomy of a look at that. SMR is popping right where we're speaking. This is the anatomy of swing trading and finding a few players that work and pushing the throttle and then pulling back for a few days. And I was telling Andy, it seems like 3 days is like the sweet spot. After something's really pushed, it needs a good 3 days of washout, and then it's ready. And so these seem to have maybe caught a little bit of a bid here midday, and if they did, then I'm going to hold them into the close into tomorrow.
Well, it's cool watching this URA and then actually, or SMR and then overlay. I'll switch to URA quickly. So very, very closely tracking
Mm.
both of those, right? So that's a good way. Instead of looking at the S&P 500, you're probably way better off looking at URA to go through and say, hey, it doesn't really matter what the SPY does. I think it matters more what uranium does. So that's good.
Oh yeah, actually, speaking of headlines, but we beat it to death. That's why I didn't say anything. Zero Hedge did have another article yesterday about the solution for AI data centers is going to be small nuclear clean energy. So we're not
CEG.
alone in our thought. And
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, CEG strong BWXT is finally maybe going sideways here after a giant run. BWXT, these are the bigger names.
Well, it's funny because and I didn't know this, and you didn't know this because just for the users, we usually record this on Friday. Today we're recording it on Thursday. Just have a child's doctor's appointment tomorrow, and we obviously don't know what's going to land on TI strength, our relative strength system, um, when we're recording because we have to wait for the close in order to do that. And BWXC was on there as well, so it's just interesting to see, right? Once the algorithms that are looking at things like relative strength start to catch up with stories, start to, sometimes you have these moments where everything finally agrees and you get your move, and you take your trade off of that. But all right, let's get started. Well, let's start with CPI. That seems a big number. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
paying $1.99 to read this, but all we need to know is that I think CPI was expected to be 2.2 and it came in at 2.4, and
Mm-hmm.
that was enough for I go on Twitter and it lists all the Twitter spaces that are going on. I think I counted like 5 Twitter spaces with 1,000 people in them each listening to CPI. Um, SPY didn't really move. Qs didn't really move. Right, this is the current SPY candle as we're talking. Just really inside, super tight, do nothing day. But Steve was mentioning that gold and silver had a little bit of a pickup, right? So we had a gap up, and we had a continuation
Yeah.
of gold, and then we had silver move as well. So you said you were looking at some of the silver miners.
Oh, some of the miners this morning, like Pan Am Silver and CDE and some of these other names, they had a pretty good pop this morning, and they're giving a little, maybe sitting a little bit now. Yeah, there go pauses on highs. Look at that.
Mm,
I didn't chase any of these things. Yesterday we were kind of laughing at a non-event. The Fed minutes came out, and the market
yep.
didn't seem to care about anything. The current is moving from lower left to upper right of this market. If you're trying to short things, I feel for you.
Hmm.
Put your canoe in the water and let the bow of the canoe show you which way you need to go. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, gold and silver, silver stocks, mining. I think it's all coming on the heels of the CPI. Let me talk about that. I'm obviously a cynic if you haven't figured that out. And most of these data numbers that have come out, I feel have been very much massaged on the initial read. And I say that only because on the revisions, they're always going in the opposite direction to the bad side. And so if 2.4 was the best they could jigger to come out of a 2.2 expectation today, I bet you anything the revisions might even head in the wrong direction and go higher a month from now. So the inflation trade is on.
Yeah, I think I talked about this in a prior episode, but it was a fascinating podcast. I wish I could find it, and if I do, I'll put it in the description below. But it was just bringing on somebody who actually does this from like it was the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I think it is. So it's this third party that all they do is get inflation. And the guy was kind of nicely trying to prod on why it was
Mm.
wrong so much. And he's like, listen, we rely on voluntary surveys to get this data, which is like, who answers their phone and answers? If you're running a business, if you're running a used car dealership, or you're running a plumbing business, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics call you, are you going to pick up the phone and sit down and have a half-hour conversation with them about what you're planning on doing with, like? And he's like, so he brought a chart, and he was like, back in the 60s and 70s and through the 80s and 90s, people actually answered surveys. Now nobody answers their phone. I think that he was getting like 3% of people they called. So they're guessing at that
Well,
point, right?
you're guessing, and what they're doing is they're creating. I don't know the name of the model. You can look it up. Google's a great resource, so is GPT. But they basically rely on a model now. So they do the best they can with surveys, and then they turn that, and it just becomes another input into a model that they have created. Now, 9 out of 10 models created usually benefit the person you're employed by. So
Yeah.
let's leave it at
Well,
that.
and it's just, if there's, yeah, if you're getting 70%, which is what he started at, this is how many people would respond. Now you're down to like sub 10%. It's just one
So
of
they
those
have to
things
guess.
that a government
Hmm.
does, that you're like, you've got the data. You know how many people are getting paychecks, right? Because you're collecting the tax, right? You have the data. You know what's going on. It just seems so weird that they're going to call people and ask. But anyway, so that's
Because
the
they're
introduction.
trying to they're trying to project, and that's whatever.
Yeah, well, that's the whole Warren Buffett quote, right? If you've got two
Mhm.
economists on your staff, you've got too many, because they don't they guess all day and they're usually wrong. Now, speaking of things more in the future,
Mm.
this is going to be Friday when this comes out, so this will already have been passed. So it'll be kind of fun. We get to place a guess, and the viewers get to see whether we right or wrong. But how long have we heard about the Tesla robotaxi? It's been, Elon has been talking about this for, I think, 5 years plus. That the idea is that if you're sitting at home working all day, or if maybe you go to work or whatever, you'll be able to click a button on your phone if you want and rent out your Tesla. So, especially places that are self-driving and allow self-driving and all of that, your car will just go, and it'll pick someone up, and it'll drop them off at a destination, and you'll get money. So it's kind of, the analogy that makes the most sense to me is Airbnb. To me, it seems like an absolute nightmare that some random
Laughing.
person.
I'm having visions. I can't wait to share.
Well, just like, every time, most of the times in my life, if I'm ever in a taxi or an Uber, I'm going to business stuff, doing meetings. I traveled a lot for trade ideas, went to a lot of conferences, that kind of stuff, or I am drunk off my ass. And that second one,
Hmm.
you definitely don't want someone driving around. I could see a,
Yeah.
a robot picking up like four drunk
Hmm.
girls stumbling out of the bar, puking and spilling stuff, and
You beat me to the joke. I mean, I was just gonna say, I got 2 hours. I'll let my Tesla go on the market, and it comes back with a pile of vomit, in the passenger seat. So,
yeah.
yeah, sounds fun. I will say this though. I mean, this is the future, regardless of where they come up with these cars. If you're using the ride share and renting your Tesla back to the system, that's a cool concept and all. But that's certainly going to be a niche. Um, I don't know who it was, but the guy was right. And I'll preface this by saying, a lot of people are concerned about, GPT and AI taking their jobs. Inflation is killing us. We're all worried, and then there's that universal basic income that's coming out. Well, there's certain things I think in life that are just going to kind of work themselves out. And as we go forward, maybe a 5 year, future, we'll look from right now, your ride share, your Uber budget's probably going to be just 10 cents on the dollar because they're going to have this stuff worked out. And it's not me. A guy was saying this. He goes, I don't think people fully understand how cheaply they will be able to hail a ride within a few moments anywhere they are in a city and
Well,
do it very cheaply.
one, and that also creates, and this is what, I remember Elon talking about this way back in the day. His idea was, well, why most people out there have two cars, and they have one car they use all the time, and they have the other car that they use when the first car is in use. He sees that being kind of a big reduction in household spending, where if I have one car and that's the daily driver, and then, oh no, my wife needs to drop off the kids and I want to go to the gym or something like that, it, as soon as prices come down and they're really cheap, then all of a sudden, instead of me having a second car for those moments, I'm just using Robotaxi. What was the, do you remember Total Recall? Arnold
Hmm.
Schwarzenegger. There was that
Hmm.
the taxi with the little robot man in it that would turn to him and
Hmm.
talk. Eventually went crazy and ripped it out. Anyway, I forget the name. That would have been a good joke. But some things to look at. I guess first we can look at Tesla and we can kind of look at this here. But I also think the ride shares, I think that's a good point. I think we should take a look at those guys too. See how they're going to deal with this. So Tesla, little hammer, right? We're about
Hmm.
halfway through the day, but so far looks like it sold off a little bit, and now it's holding that support. Other than that, I don't really see too much here.
Yeah, I mean, I made the joke a few weeks ago in San Diego, California. A white Tesla, you can't go 8 seconds without looking around and finding somebody driving a white Tesla or seeing it in the parking lot. They are just they're beyond ubiquitous to the point where it's almost insane, just crazy. So I thought there's got to be more to this company, and there is. There's the whole AI, the whole robot, the whole software. They're not just a car company. So I had to remind myself of that.
Well, and to get, not into the nitty gritty, but again, I like to watch documentaries, podcast stuff. So one podcast I was listening to, um, I guess where all of the other self-driving cars are doing, they're doing LiDAR. And for those who don't know, LiDAR is essentially
Hmm.
like radar. You shoot a light at something, it comes back to you, you can get a rough distance of what it is and the shape of the thing. Elon's been always against that because they're just using regular cameras. And the difference is they're using regular cameras that get processed through an AI feature, an AI filter. So each Tesla has its own kind of AI built into it
And
where
it's
it
learning.
yeah.
Hmm.
So it's the difference between a radar system like an old school or
Hardware and software, pretty much. Yeah,
exactly. It's they're just using a
firmware.
regular like an iPhone camera
Hmm.
and it's smart enough to know where the people are. So that's a big deal. Well, let's take a look at Uber. Does anyone use Lyft anymore? That's still
I
a
do.
company.
I do. Yeah, I've used it.
So Uber's
Been a while.
I don't know, it's button up near highs here. It's not nearly as strong as a
Hmm.
lot of the stocks in the market that are making new all-time highs, but we've got
It seems to,
a little bit of
yeah, it
around a
seems to be
bottom here.
doing a lot better relatively than Lyft. That's for sure. So I mean, even though I use Lyft, doesn't mean that everybody else does. So the charts are showing us the relative strength. Uber's the winning that battle.
I wonder, just thinking about that, I never thought about the whole ride sharing thing until you brought it up, but I could see right away Uber buying a bunch of these Teslas so that when I open up my Uber app, maybe there's a couple options. Do you want a robot to drive you? Do you want a human to drive you?
Cheaper price. Yeah.
And right, the robots may be a little bit cheaper, and then because right away for the next 10 years there's like, think of your parents aren't getting in a car, same with my parents are not getting in the car with a robot. There's no goddamn way, right? They're getting they want a person, but over time I think that will expand out. So these, I
Yeah.
was thinking it might hurt them, but it might actually in the short term be a beneficiary if they end up
Yeah.
embracing the model, as long as they don't try to fight it, which I don't think the corporation really cares one way or another. Another quick little news one, not insane amount to say here, but Netflix prices may be going up again. It seems like a lot of these streaming services are just they're trying it looks like they're trying to find a breaking point. Like I think Spotify raised its price like 3 or 4 times. Um, eh, Netflix, a lot of these companies, what they're just doing is I think they're just trying to find that point of diminishing returns. How much do I ratchet up the price until something hurts
Hmm.
me, because I don't have it, but I guess you can have a very cheap version of Netflix that you have to watch an ad before the thing starts.
Yeah, like Hulu does that too.
Yeah, and it's people, I guess, really like it because I don't think I may try it, but I guess it doesn't interrupt the show. It's at the beginning, so
Hmm.
and then you watch the
It's an
show,
ad roll. Yeah.
which I'd be okay
You
with.
know, the way I look at this is they're probably right in probing that elasticity, as they called it in economics, the point of diminishing returns. And I would say in a pre-recessionary, possibly current recessionary, definitely inflationary environment, you got a lot of people looking to save money, and a lot of the younger kids, it's expensive to go out. And when you just say, "Hey, I'm just going to take some of my entertainment budget and I'm just going to just keep my Netflix going," they raised it $5. That's okay. I enjoy it. I don't know. I think that's what they're doing, and I think you're right. They're trying to
It,
figure it out.
it's almost like a boiling the frog alive kind of thing. If they raise it a couple
Mm,
bucks, everyone just looks at it and goes, "Ah, that's an extra $2. It's an extra $20 a year."
Their costs
Or
aren't going up, as far as I know. I mean, licensing is their only major cost, and of course production. The crap they produce at Netflix, don't even get me started on that.
I was going to say, I don't know if I've actually watched something that Netflix has
It's
done
horrible.
in
I
ages,
watch
right?
documentaries and that's it.
Yeah, like I remember what House of Cards back in the day. With that, there was a lot of high budget names like that. I don't know if they're doing any of that stuff, or at least maybe I'm just a boomer and I don't. They're marketing it to kids or something. But I haven't seen anything that's like a super high budget cool thing they've done in a long time. But right, if you take a look at the chart, that's what we're always getting back to. Button up through all-time highs. It's popping up through here. We have earnings in 5 days, so this is one thing that I absolutely love. I don't know how many times this has saved my life. Just this little yellow box
Yeah,
that says,
red. Yeah,
"Yeah, be careful. You got to be out by the 17th after market close." But currently, I just drew out. You have this little ascending triangle. It was struggling against 725 for the longest time, popping through. That price is getting a little high. Maybe reverse split or something's in their cards. It'd be interesting to look at. But what are you thinking here on Netflix?
it's a very strong chart, and you know, if they can just keep boiling the frog, $3 or $4 here or there, there's probably not a whole lot of margin that they're giving up to do that. It's probably some pretty sweet margin. So it's a very strong chart. And again, I think it's an anti-inflationary, anti-recessionary type stock because it actually keeps people entertained for much less than getting out, getting a ride, spending money on drinks and food and tips. So,
Babysitters, things I never thought
and
of before
babysitters,
I'd get in
yeah.
babysitters. Well, that's about it for this week, guys. The only thing that I'm gonna leave everyone with, as someone, I like to be the one that talks about the election because I'm Canadian. I don't care what's gonna happen. So I just look at the seasonality and what we generally expect. It's a very um, so I'm going to repeat this a lot because it's like one of the strongest seasonality correlations that exists in the market. You have a choppy slash October, you have a choppy November, and then after November, generally speaking, you get a nice trend one way or the other. Whatever happens, again, no dog in the fight. But I've seen people, right? We're basically at the exact same price we were in September 19th, right? So we're almost a month of this just nonsense sideways chop. And I know from watching and talking to traders and all of the stuff that I do, this environment hurts the most amount of people. A massive uptrend, a massive downtrend, there's money to be made there. This kind of environment can be very, very hard. So just know that this is what should be happening, quote unquote, seasonality wise. So, just don't feel like you need to trade and you need to trade aggressively in order to have something. Either do what a lot of me and Steve does with buying pullbacks, selling things when they rip, trading around these kind of ranges, or do something else until November, and then hopefully we'll have a trend to speak of there. Do you have any
Yep.
ideas to leave the people with?
I just think it's going to be volatile. It's going to be volatile. So smaller size, less positions. Just don't be as risk on as you might normally be until things settle down, which is probably like Michael said, maybe in December. We'll
Yeah,
see.
and that's what the seasonality says anyway. All right, guys. Well, as always, thank you for tuning in. If you made it this far, leave a like, retweet, share. If you haven't tried Trade Ideas, come check it out. It's what's powering all of this and what's bringing this to you guys. Appreciate it very much. Talk to you guys next week.
Thank you.